Starting with another gem from Expositors Collective, a quotation from Philip Anthony Mitchell: "Preach the truth, whether it fills up a room or clears it out." Well, we hope to fill up the room, but we'd rather be faithful and empty it than adjust the message to fill it. So there we go. Okay, we've been a little kind of off rhythm for the last few weeks, just with different comings and goings, vacations, post-weekender a couple weeks ago. There's just lots of sort of different dynamics right now. So we do this as we're able, and we're glad to do it. And so we're picking up in the Gospel of Mark. We were in the passage yesterday that dealt with the beheading of John the Baptist, and went into a little bit of the next section, which is often not divided the way that I divided it yesterday. But did I convince you guys that dealing with this portion is happening in the middle of Jesus sending out the 12 and them coming back and reporting, and so having those two texts in view helps inform our understanding of the beheading of John the Baptist? Yes, no, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think even like wording wise, because verse 33 is now, I mean, like, you know, there's like even a change in that scene. But I think if you go from beginning of Mark, how do you call it? Mark Burger?
Mark and Sandwich, Mark and Burger. There's a kid's book on the Gospel of Mark. I forget the sister's name who wrote it. She is the one where I got the Mark and Burger analogy from. I like burgers more than sandwiches, depending. So I've gone with burger. But most commentaries you'll find Mark and Sandwich.
Yeah, I think it's helpful, and then it helps people learn that we don't have to always follow those headings.
Yeah, they're in our
Bibles.
They can be helpful as we're just trying to locate stuff, but I want to ignore them as I'm dealing with the text itself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite Bibles is the ESV Reader's Bible. So it just has the chapters and no verses, and just meant to kind of be read like a chapter book in a way. I think it helps to have that in mind when we do sermon prep, but also as we read it. Sometimes you finish a passage, it's like, oh, I feel like it's not done. And then you just read a few more to kind of conclude. So I think you did a good job in a very tough passage, I would say. So, yeah, appreciate it.
It's good. I always remove paragraph breaks and verses and headings whenever I'm doing preparing to preach or teach on a passage. I just remove all of that because it's not helpful that in that moment. It's helpful as you're reading through things or whatever, but in that moment I'm just dealing with that text, and I don't want even like verse numbers or paragraph divisions to influence what I as I'm taking that text on its own. So I remove all of that stuff, and I find that often very helpful. A lot of times the divisions are great, the headings are good, they're in good places, but I don't want to just assume or presume that. I want to do my own legwork on that. So
sorry,
no, you go ahead.
I think one of the things that it's a small sample size so far, but one of the themes that could be emerging, if you think back to Mark 3 as well, when the scribes come up to Jesus and they say, this guy is possessed by Satan himself. And you see the followers of Jesus, everyone's questioning him. And then it gets to the end of that passage and Jesus says, here's my true family. And it's almost like Mark brings like rest to the situation. And I think we saw a similar case of that today or yesterday, of all of these things are happening. John the Baptist has been beheaded. It seems awfully grim right now. And Mark brings it to a rest again and says, like, no, this is who the Lord Jesus Christ is. He offers us rest. He promises us eternal rest. So I absolutely think that verse divisions made sense. There's resolution that happens there.
Yeah, good. I saw it there. Obviously, I did it the way that I did because I thought that was the right division of it. And like I said, I didn't encounter anyone just consulting some commentaries and resources who did it that way. Although I would say a number do point out that sort of Mark sandwich of the coming and the going and the coming back, and that scene happening in the middle of that. So we talked about the different kinds of individuals that we'll meet kind of in the thick of, or the battle of, or the gauntlet of gospel ministry in which Jesus sends us into And so we talked about opponents, and we had different kinds of opponents: the pundit, the hostile, the craven. We talked about meeting the faithful. That can be faithful martyrs, that can be faithful ministers, and then we talked about meeting the Lord himself. Any comments, thoughts, reflections, questions, ways in which the Lord used the preaching of his word yesterday in your own lives?
I can often be stumped in a way by the first section on the opponents, and that can often be where my courage goes to die, because I see those three different types of people, and I think I can't do it. This is it for me. And I think what you helped my own heart and resolve in a way was considering the other part of it, and considering the fact that, like, even the example of martyrs who would count their lives as nothing compared to the sake of Christ. And then that's because they're looking forward to the eternal rest that's available for them in the Lord Jesus Christ. And so it revealed parts of my heart and my mind where I am too fixated on that which is temporal, like Romans 8 says, and that which is comfortable. And I would approach a conversation, whether it's with a neighbor or someone that you meet at the store, and you're like, well, this is going to be uncomfortable, or they might meet this with a little bit of hostility. Well, I'm just not going to do it then. And to consider the example here that no, like, our lives are for the sake of bringing the gospel to even the hostile and the craven. We're called to go and spread that gospel seed no matter what soil it will land on. And we don't do it just for the sake of putting ourselves through a gauntlet for no apparent reason. We do it because we see the Lord Jesus Christ. We see that eternal rest is offered in him. And that makes the comfort or lack thereof in this world just fade away. And say, you know what? I can endure this because Christ endured so much more for me. So why would I not give my life? It reminds me of 2 Corinthians 5, right? Where Paul says that the love of Christ controls us because we have concluded that one has died, therefore all have died, and he has died that we might not live for ourselves, but for the one who died for us. And when I read something like this in Mark, I think, yeah, that's exactly that. We let the love of Christ control us because it's so much better than any of the opposition that we'll face.
That's good. And this is not something that made it into the sermon yesterday. I'm just responding to what you're saying now, is that I think that those are great reflections, brother. Thank you. I would say, in addition to what you're saying, our courage can go to die when we consider those different opponents that we very likely will encounter in some way, shape, or form. I think that we also live in a setting where we're so results driven, and there's an instantaneousness that we want to that. And so I think we should recognize in that text that John did everything right. Mm-hmm. And he still met with those kinds of opponents. And his ministry wasn't even that lengthy, relatively speaking. Yeah. And yet it was faithful, and it was courageous, and it honored the Lord. And so, but he was beheaded. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's also helpful to realize that though we encounter those opponents, that doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. Yeah. It may mean that we're actually doing something right. And so it's important that we're not measuring our faithfulness or effectiveness by the number of opponents we do or do not meet. Yeah. Because that's a reality. And so I think that's another helpful component there, is John was doing everything right, and yet.
Yeah. I think if we're honest, we look like to the end of our life and we'd love to say, like, man, I see all these people that I led to Christ. They matured, all of these things. If that happens, I get to 80 years old and I'm good to go. But like the picture that you drew out yesterday, the last thing that John saw was the people that were cutting his head off. And then, like you said, before his head hit the ground, he was with the Lord. And so that kills pragmatism. That kills desire for results, because John just lived faithfully. And his resolve at the end of his life was faithfulness to Christ, despite the fact that his head was about to be chopped off.
That's good. Is there anything you want to add, brother?
It made me think of I just found it. It's a questionnaire I found online from a church in South Asia. So before they are getting ready to baptize someone, these are the questions they ask.
Ooh.
Are you willing to leave home and lose the blessing of your father? Are you willing to lose your job? Are you willing to go to the village and those who persecute you, forgive them and share the love of Christ with them? Are you willing to give an offering to the Lord? Are you willing to be beaten rather than deny your faith? Are you willing to go to prison? Are you willing to die for Jesus?
Wow.
And I think it's been just a good reminder of a sermon like that. The price we have to pay that we don't really pay here in North America. Like during COVID, hearing people in Canada like we're being persecuted, and it's like guys in Africa, in Middle East, in South Asia, just being like, are you kidding me? And I think it's been helpful that you added that last point that we'll meet the Lord at the end. And I think that's the hope that we go through anything we'll go in life, good things, bad things, challenges. And I was just thinking about non-Christians in the room as you were preaching. Man, if they expected Jesus for you and everything's gonna be great and just give your life, I'm like, oh man. So I went to some of those non-Christian. I'm like, hey, I want to know everything that went through your head today. Tell them to your friends, and they'll report back. But I'd love to hear how you were feeling this morning as you're hearing this is the cost to follow Jesus, or the two people that are about to be baptized next week. How do they feel about that, right? And I think they do feel the cost of following the Lord now, and I think it's just a good reminder. We all face challenges, we all face tough situations in our life, and I think it's sometimes I think people will say like, God, where are you? I think you ask that question like, why is God allowing that?
Yeah.
And then you say you're gonna talk about it, and I think it might have lost you, but I feel like that question left unanswered for me.
That question was left unanswered. I mean, yeah, it was much more sort of implicit than an explicit answer. But when you come back and you realize why would God allow this, then you read Revelation 6. And you realize, no, God has a very intentional purposes in that. Just to those who have been killed, just wait until the full number of those who are to be killed for this will come in. And you see, you look at John's life. Well, doesn't that spur us on to be faithful? You read about this man who was faithful unto death. Well, I think that's going to help me a little bit and help you a little bit in the ways that you've already indicated to be more courageous and more faithful and more. And so, yeah, I didn't return to it explicitly or specifically. But the Lord uses those kinds of people. I almost said this yesterday in the sermon. There are some people in our church who knew someone who was killed. Kos Fiji is the name of the brother, who he's buried in Bangkok, and there are church members who knew this man, was sent out by Forward Church, and I think he probably died maybe about 35 to 40 years ago, something around that number. And someone came and talked to me last night after our prayer meeting and talked about how shaping that individual was in their lives. And so there's a purpose that God has in, calling different people to different paths and what that looks like, and we're spurred on by. And so that was something that I was trying to draw out. We will meet faithful martyrs, and they help us to be faithful where we are, even if that's not the same trajectory that God will call us to. And so I think that's one way that God uses such sufferings. And I think the full purposes of that will be revealed at the judgment when Jesus does come and inflict vengeance, right? And all accounts are settled, and we will see the answer to the why of suffering and evil and those types of things most fully there. But I think we can consider some purposes for that in the present.
Did you quote yesterday in the sermon Hebrews 11? Did I hear that at one point?
Nope. I don't believe so.
I was thinking about Hebrews 11 in light of when the author of Hebrews says,
Oh, the world is not worthy of them?
yeah,
I did mention that.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Right before that point, the author of Hebrews, listing off those who have suffered for the faith, says they were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed by the sword, they went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And I appreciated you mentioning the fact, like just that nod to of whom the world is not worthy, in light of your last point of the fact of what Christ offers. Like the author of Hebrews says multiple times, like there is something better waiting for us. And so even though we might not even know the result of the suffering that we go through for the sake of Christ, we might get to the end of our lives and say, like, Lord, how were you going to use this? Or we might say that in the middle of our suffering. And like you said, it spurs us on. It also, as Romans 8 also said, it's preparing glory for us for glory. And so when we count the cost and say, Lord, I would rather Christ be formed in me through my suffering for your sake than live a comfortable life. I think that should be our prayer out of what you preached yesterday.
That's good, Josh. I would also say that, why does this happen? Why would God allow this? Is there not something that's said about the worth of Christ himself?
Yeah.
That not only have there been many men and women willing to die for the sake of Christ, in their doing that, it's not only that they die, but also the manner in which they died. And there's people who will die for things they believe in, but by flying planes into towers. We're not talking about that. Just because you are willing to die for something doesn't make it meaningful or something you should pay attention to. But it's the manner in which Christians have died. It's their praying for the person who is about to kill them. It's they're sharing the gospel with the person who's about to put them to death. It's there's something about the manner of the death of Christians. It's not violent. It's not right. They're not lashing out. There's a willingness to lay down without retribution and vengeance and those types of things. That says something about the worth of Christ and the power of Christ. And so that's certainly a way that the Lord uses that. And there are stories out there, right, of people being converted because of the way that Christian prisoners treated them, or it's incredible just to see that. So that's certainly another reason, another way that God uses this is to show the surpassing worth of Christ.
Yeah, makes me think about that line from the Getty song "Let the Nations Be Glad," when I think it's the second verse of talking about martyrs in many ages gone before, and I think they say there are many saints and martyrs conquered though they died. To the spiritual victory of people that have gone because they say Christ is so much better than all of these things, and their life ends in death, and you might not even know about them, but they see Christ as immense worth. Like a treasure in a field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's worth everything. So yeah, that's helpful.
That's good. One area that I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I was very glad to just wade into a little bit, was just reflecting a little bit on really the implications of not only Jesus meeting us at the end, but also along the way when he said to the 12, come and rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he could see they were tired. They didn't even have an opportunity to eat. There's just people kept coming, and he's like, let's go away, and you can get some rest. And that was helpful as a minister of the gospel to be able to say to a congregation, I'm limited, and the Lord knows that, and he's good with that. And we should all be good with that. We should all recognize that. We should recognize that about ourselves. For those of us who are in ministry, there's a number of individuals in our church, because of how close Heritage College and Seminary is, who are heading towards ministry. And so we need to see the Lord recognize our limits for ourselves, But I think we also need to see the Lord recognize limits in other human beings,
Yeah.
and that He is the one who is always available, accessible, all wise, powerful, those types of things. That was enjoyable just to reflect on out loud as a pastor with a congregation. That was helpful to me.
It also gives encouragement to our church that what it looks like to be faithful to Christ might not look like what it looked like for John the Baptist. And we live faithfully for Christ in the day by day of dying to ourselves.
Yes.
And so speaking about limits, of course, it doesn't mean live comfortably and idle lives.
Yeah, we're not talking about sloth, laziness,
No.
right? Those types of things. We want to spend and be spent
Yeah.
for the sake of Christ.
But there's also the necessity of recognizing God's given us this many hours. He's given us this much energy. Let's be fruitful with what he gives us and leave the rest to him.
What's the one book I've been teasing you about all residency long? Well, maybe not all residency long, but
I don't even remember what it's called.
You're Only Human.
You're Only Human. That's right.
Not your favorite book at the in the reading of it, but I keep saying to you, you'll thank me later. And a few times I'd be like, that's why I had you read You're Only Human. So
I'm
anyway,
only human.
there you go. We're only human. The Lord recognizes that, and it's just very helpful to know He's that gracious, kind, compassionate, and it's just good to see that. Although in that moment they didn't get the rest,
Right.
because the people went ahead of them and got there first. So when they arrived, but Jesus' response is incredible, and we'll get to that this coming Sunday, Lord willing. So you'll have to come back for that. So, any last comments? No? Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you telling us you find these helpful, as you do from time to time, those of you who listen. And if you have questions, things like that, you want us to take up, send them our way, we'll do our best. Thanks for listening.